Everybody loves the butter Jeep. So on this episode of the Dirthead Shed, it's time to get the LS engine back in this thing, get the transmission in it, get this thing way farther along, see how many of these parts we can get off my floor and onto the Jeep. It's gonna get good. Let's go ahead and start with a rundown of what I kind of want to get done on this thing this week. Basically, I need to get the motor mounts kind of finished up, which they're welded all up. I just got to paint them. Then we're going to assemble this new Centerforce clutch that I got. I'm not sure if it's all inclusive or if there's still parts I need to buy. I think I actually need to get some hydraulics from a TJ for this setup, but we're gonna assemble the clutch. We're gonna get it on the engine that we're actually using. That's this one over here. This is known as the kitty litter motor. We're gonna throw the clutch on that. We're gonna go ahead and get rid of the super awesome engine that I thought I bought and had a blown head gasket. So we'll pull that off, and then we've got that bell housing from quickdraw brand to the AX15. So let's get basically that engine bolted up to that transmission bell housing and kind of call that a win. Once that's together, then it can go in the rig, but not first. All right, I guess first things first is kind of figuring out what parts I've got. I got this clutch assembly from Centerforce. I ran a Centerforce clutch in this when it was a 4-liter 6-cylinder, and I did the heavy flywheel, and the thing worked really good. It actually just chugged along. You couldn't hardly make the thing stall, which is really important when you're doing rock crawling stuff, especially if you're in a rig that doesn't have a whole lot of horsepower and a whole lot of deep gearing. So if you can get it to where the thing will almost just keep idling down the trail at a few hundred RPMs, then you're winning. This one, I assume, is sort of a heavyweight flywheel, or a stock flywheel. Should be a stock flywheel for like a Suburban or Tahoe with a 5.3 and a 5-speed. That should fit. That should go with that quickdraw brand bell housing that I got, and everything should jive. I think the only thing I'm really waiting on or looking for is clutch hydraulics, because that bell housing uses a TJ style slave cylinder, and then I got to adapt the TJ style master cylinder to this firewall. I'll probably end up having to just run to the local parts store to get that. But we've got a couple of varieties of flywheel bolts. We got our pilot bearing. We got our clutch alignment tool. We should be able to smack all this stuff together and have an engine, transmission that are all bolted together and sort of ready to go. Let's drag that kitty litter motor out, start bolting this thing up to it. I don't know what I'm doing, but we're doing this together. The LM7, one of the greatest engines of all time. You can tell on here, the casting in the block. This is either a 4.8 or a 5.3. I ran some numbers on it. It should be a 5.3 LM7 out of like a 2002 or 2004 Tahoe. The one thing that I did that does sort of give me hope that this engine's going to be good is that it has a rebuilder tag on the back of this head, which means at least it's been gone through at some point in its life, and maybe it only has 100,000 miles on it instead of 300,000 miles on it. We will find out. I'm not putting an extra or an aftermarket cam in it right now. I'm not doing squat. I just want to get this thing in there, see if she runs. I am going to try to keep all of this accessory package bone stock and run this fan and clutch assembly as well. So if all goes well, I can just go to the auto parts store when I have a problem, get an alternator and a belt, and everything's just normal. I got to adapt this power steering pump into the system for the Jeep, which shouldn't be too terribly hard. And I bought a cool radiator for it from Advanced Adapter. So we should have an LS swap radiator for a Jeep that actually kind of fits. So let's get the blown head gasket motor off of here, and that way we can use the cherry picker for the kitty litter motor. All right, I'm kind of getting things sorted out. I got the engine we're going to use pulled out, and I figured I'd start grabbing some of the parts. I got a bunch of Holley goodies, like this valley pan cover that goes on and makes it to where you don't have to run the NOx sensors under it. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw the valley pan on. I'll probably throw valve covers on it. I wanna kinda get it sealed up a little bit more so that when I'm going in and out with this thing, I'm not like getting extra dirt and junk in it. It's not like this thing's been super clean in the past. I mean, it was full of rocks and kitty litter, so whatever damage is done is probably already done, but I can try and do my best. I need to clean that way better. It's not actually going on right this second. I also picked up a full Felpro engine gasket set for this thing a while back, which cost a small fortune, but I feel like it's gonna be money well spent by the time I'm done. Like that. Brand new valley pan gasket. Psh, come on. I may end up having to rob some hardware off of that engine though, because this one is missing some stuff. That one's got some stuff. We'll figure it all out as we go. All right, I went through with glass cleaner and the Scotch-Brite and kind of got that surface cleaned up. Now I'm gonna go ahead and just get some oil going in this thing. I can at least try to get a little bit on the cam. I can get a little bit up in here. And get a little bit over here on the timing chain. Just because I have no idea the last time this thing ran. I'm gonna go ahead and just throw one cord in right now. I'll probably put another cord in when I'm doing the valve covers, just to get some oil up on all this valve train. And then hopefully at the end of the day, we end up with good oil in here. The stuff has at least a little bit of oil on it for the first startup. And we're not trying to break in a new motor. It's not like I got a new cam in here I gotta break in. But we might as well do some preventative stuff just to make sure we don't have a full-blown dry start on this. I believe that goes that way. Not gonna use anything on these gaskets. Assemble them dry and let the O-rings do their job. I need to borrow these bolts. We might as well go ahead and get the lift plate in place for this thing. I'm going to put washers under it just so that it doesn't scratch up this new valley pan. I'm just barely cinching this thing down. I'm not going to torque it yet. Let's go ahead and do some valve covers on here. All right, we got the black wrinkle finish valve covers for this thing. And they're the type that make it to where you bolt the coil directly on without having to do extra brackets, which should be kind of neat. Keep it clean. I feel like I probably should have ordered a bolt kit too, but that other engine over there should kind of give up enough goodies to where we're good to go. Is this thing gonna be good or junk? We're gonna be pulling this thing apart as soon as it fires up, or is it gonna stay in there for years? I guess we'll find out. Do our best to get a little bit of oil on everything before we close this thing back up. It's wild to think how grungy this motor once was. It really has me wondering if it's gonna be good again. This isn't Monster Garage. These are going in recycling. It's a little bit later. I've been out here just kind of cleaning and painting and getting the motor mounts all painted up so they're in a rusty mess. The engines are just chilling. I've also got paint going on over here. These are the motor side of those Mountain Off-Road Enterprises LS swap mounts. I got the heater on them. Hopefully these things will cure enough to where I can handle them here pretty soon. But while that stuff is doing its thing, I'm gonna go ahead and I guess get one engine onto the ground. I gotta get this one off the engine stand so I can mess with the flywheel. So I guess it's time to get that thing, that off the stand and sort this mess out. I think that engine's gonna end up just having to get put aside for a little bit, but it's getting tight in here. I got stuff everywhere. You used to have a lot of space. That's what happens with a shop, especially when you got too many projects. It just fills up super quick. There we go. That wasn't very smooth at all. All right, let's see what we can do about this whole situation. Look at this flywheel. Made in USA, Centerforce. Let me grab one of the old bolts just to mock it up. Make sure it doesn't fall on the ground. Okay, look at that guy. Now we're talking. All right, I'm going through, since this is a conversion, I've got a pilot bearing from both the adapter company and one with the clutch. This is the one from the adapter company. This should fit the input diameter on there, correct? This is going to be our jam right here. I'm going to go ahead and put a little more grease in this and we'll go ahead and install that bearing. The instructions said to make sure the seal side is towards the transmission. There's like a little O-ring seal in there. That's going all right. Okay, doesn't seem to be wanting to go any further, so we'll call that good. The clutch came with new flywheel bolts, factory ones, which are cool. They've got a little Loctite on them. I'm gonna add a little more. All right, I feel good about that. We got 82 pounds all the way around it. It's very consistent feeling. I call that a win. Pilot bearings in, flywheels on. Let's start assembling this clutch and then we can figure out what we got to do on the transmission side of things. I'm going to clean this clutch, or I'm going to clean this flywheel up a little bit before we bolt the clutch up to it, just to make sure it doesn't have a bunch of oil or something on it from shipping. It doesn't have a bunch of handprints on it that might turn into hot spots. There we go. Now that is super clean. Still had some junk on it, even after all the other cleanings. All right, here we go. Centerforce going on. The alignment tool came with the adapter kit for the bell housing, so it fits both things, which is cool. Heck yeah, look at this thing. It's coming together. That lines up, that lines up, that all lines up. Yep, we are looking good. It's becoming a real thing. I'm gonna go ahead and throw a little Loctite on these. Again, I'm just gonna have this thing set on the super light setting. Make sure this clutch goes together like you want to work your way around this so that it's as even as possible. You want to make sure the alignment tool stays in place, doesn't shift around on you. I want to get a better feel for it though. I don't really big fan of electric impacts yet. Let me go figure out the torque spec on this and we'll torque that down. Look at that. No wonder I put this off forever. This is a ton of work. I've got the one transmission over here on the trash can. That's actually the transmission that was in this Jeep last when I drove it. But I had picked up what I think is a good, relatively newish rebuild AX15. So I've got that going with the bell housing and adapter. I had to play musical, I don't know if you call this a front retainer plate or a snout or whatever, but the one that was in that good transmission had the snout cut off of it because I think this had some sort of hydraulic throwout bearing adapter thing going on. So I had to pull it off. I had to pull parts off the other transmission. I'm getting the throwout bearing fork all adjusted. We should be pretty close to being able to bolt these two together, the transmission and the engine. And if I do this right, I shouldn't have to pull this thing apart ever. This is actually kind of cool. This housing uses a long bolt that's adjustable, so I can kind of adjust the pivot on this clutch fork from externally, and then just use this nut here as a jam nut to stop it, tighten it down. So there's some cool features on there. Let's throw this little clip in there, and then we should be able to bolt the two of these together. All right, I think this is the moment of truth. Bell housing's all torqued down. That snout thing's on. The clutch fork is operational. I don't think I should have to get in there at all. The clutch is all bolted on, and flywheel and all that's torqued. I think I can put the transmission on the engine. I'm gonna do my best to put it on just how it is. We will see if I can heave this thing around long enough to make that happen. Here we go. This is the fun in working by yourself. Can't see anything. All right. There we go. We're on. Where's the short bolt? Oh my gosh, it's getting heavy. There it is. It's not gonna fall off. Whew. It's on there. Holy cow, that was heavy. I feel bad that like really cool clutch is just hiding in there. Nobody's ever gonna see it again. Let's see how the balance is on it. That's hard on things. We've got our balance about where I want it as far as slinging it in there. I think it's time to throw this in the chassis and bolt it up to the motor mounts and call it a win for the day. Let's see if we can make that happen. This is great. Stoked. This is my first time going in with this thing with the fan and alternator and any of that front accessory stuff on it. I think I'm going to throw a ratchet strap on here just to get the tail of it up long enough to get it into the chassis. I've got that hooked down here to this transmission mount. That should allow us to get this thing to sit nice and level so that we can get it up over the core support. Come on, get in there. Okay. Okay, we are now hitting the hood. Let's see. Can I pop this without it getting too crazy? That's pretty tight. Let's get a second one in there just to catch this when it pops loose. And then we can kind of leapfrog these ratchet straps until there's not one in there. It sounds like it'll work in my head. So I want to keep this one to where it's kind of loose, but there. And then we'll pop this one loose and it should get caught by the other one. That was sketchy. Okay. Now these are loose enough to where I can take them out. Now I guess we just start trying to lower it down in there and get it to clear the firewall and all that. We did this once before, but without the fan up here, and that's what I'm thinking is going to be kind of problematic. There it is. We got that transfer case flange past the firewall. Let's bump this up just a shade to give us some diff clearance. If we can get this forward enough to start dropping the front down, we should be golden. Come on, thing. Go in there. We're getting it. Like a little half-inch at a time. All right, we're getting really close. I think what I need to do now is jack up the transmission with the floor jack and start leveling this thing out. Once I get this kind of up in place, I can prop the transmission mount under it, and that'll help kind of bring everything into place. I got the bolts in. The motor is in its mounts. How cool is that? Let's get this cherry picker out of here, and we can figure out how to get the transmission holding itself up without that jack under there. So rad. Look at that. V8 in place. Let me crawl underneath it and start propping up that transmission mount. And if I can get that thing in, stoked. Let's see if we can make this happen. I should jack that up and get it out of the way as best we can. And then it's just a matter of getting this cross member fitted into its tabs, like so. Look at that. Haha! Engine and transmission are supported in the chassis again. That is good news. Yes, parts are off the floor. Yesterday was awesome. The engine's in the Jeep, and hopefully for the final time. I've got good hopes for this thing. I think it's going to be fine. I came in this morning, cleaned up a little bit. The shop's a little better. It's still kind of a disaster, but today I want to tackle a bunch of little things. I want to get the intake manifold in place and find out what's up with the throttle body I've got, what parts I might need to buy. I've got to mess with the clutch and see if this clutch slave cylinder and hydraulic cylinder on it are going to be good to go with this bell housing. My dog really wants to play. All right, let's get busy. Come on, Hazel. Hazel wants out of the shop. She hates it in here. Basically, this bell housing that I've got is set up to use Jeep TJ style hydraulics, which I thought was going to be a royal pain, but then it turns out I think this Jeep actually has a TJ style clutch hydraulics in it already. I think somebody did some upgrade work on this, on the old transmission. So if all goes well, we might be able to just bolt this guy up. I'm not sure if this thing's pumped up or if it bottoms out or what, but as far as I can tell, that is going to bolt right in there. Holy cow. Let me transfer the studs from the other bell housing over to this, and then we'll see if we can actually like get this clutch to engage and disengage, and most importantly disengage. Check it out. I've got the clutch assembly up in there. I've got a bunch of washers stacked here right now. That's just so that I can test to see that it's going to work right before I run those nylock or top locks all the way down. I did end up cleaning these. That's actually a stud in here. I cleaned that up and I put some Loctite on it. So the stud should stay in there once that Loctite cures. But right now I figured I should just test things before I like run it home. All right, clutch is pressed. Let's see if that output shaft will turn. Oh yeah. You can even hear the clutch disc doing its thing. Pop that out of there. Try it again. Awesome, the clutch is working. I still have this adjustment over here available, and that's just a little bit of tension in or out on the ball for that fork in there. But heck yeah, problem number one solved. Clutch, boom. Let's move on to something else. All right, let's start messing with this steering. So the Jeep had this awesome PSC steering on it already with the upgraded pump and all of that. The goal, it's also got this reservoir over here and it's got this upgraded steering box. So my goal is to try and adapt this system into this bracket. And I'm sure there is a bracket that converts and does this and that. I just don't have it, and I don't know which one it is. So I think what we're going to do is just pull this original pump off. It's still got the pump with the reservoir that's built into it. This one has the remote mounted reservoir that holds more fluid. So I'm going to start by pulling the belt off of this thing, and then we'll pull this pump out and figure out what we're going to do in order to get this one in. It could be as simple as just swapping it in place and it's good, but it could get more difficult. We'll find out. All right, I went digging through my steering components, and I have, this is a stock LS pump. So I have this as a reference for what the mounting should look like. So that's a stock LS pump that came off of like a E-rod motor that I installed for a guy years ago, and then we swapped over to power steering from PSC. And then I have this, which is also a PSC pump that I've been hauling around for probably 15 years. Part of it is the right bolt pattern. I guess what I need to do is figure out what it is that I've got and what I need to make it all attach. And the Jeep is draining all over the axle. I've got the pump here on the ground. Let's try to get the mess to be as little as possible, but I think I have a plan. I think I have a plan to get a pump in there and still be able to use the use that additional like remote reservoir. Check this out. I showed you that pump that I had found from that E-rod motor I installed years ago. Well, I also have a reservoir that takes the big like -10 or -12 fitting. Junk, junk, junk. Junk, junk, junk. Junk, junk, junk. Junk, 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 junk. All right, let me update you on where we're at. This is the pump that was in the rig, that's not being used. This is the pump that was on the donor engine, that's also not being used. I've got the bracket put back in place, so that's kind of good to go. And over here we've got the pump that came with a crate motor that I installed for a guy years ago. And I took the pump and I put the PSC reservoir on the back that has the fitting for the big dash 10 fill line or 12 or whatever. So I think this is going to be the hot setup. I don't know that this pump has like the perfect pressure relief valve or makes the perfect amount of pressure for running hydro assist if I choose to do that, but I think we're really close as far as just being able to throw this in and put the pulley back on it, the original one from the LS motor, and we should be good to go. Oh, this was the other thing. Check this out. This is the stock Jeep hose, and it actually threads into the back of the LS pump, and it actually is kind of in a decent location to get right to it and not be in the way of other stuff. So all in all, I think we're kind of closing in on this. I'm going to bolt the pump in, and then we'll put the pulley on once it's in place. Put some fluid in it. Check some power steering off the list. How cool is that? Out of all the super fancy stuff, so we're going Napa. I'm sure it's going to bleed down for a little bit. I need to tighten that fitting the rest of the way. Where's my 16? Still bleeding out some. But look at that. We got the big reservoir with the filter in it. That's feeding that pump. That's the stock GM pump, but with a fancy bigger feed line to it. And then pressure side comes out of the back, goes up here to the steering box, boom, and then return back up here to the reservoir. And it's all sealed up and it's not leaking on the floor. That's awesome. And look at that, the belt's back on. Can start it up with the belt the thing came with. This is great. All right, let's move on to one more big ticket item and see if my intake manifold's gonna work or if it's gonna hit the firewall or whatever. Check this out. This is a Chevy Trailblazer intake manifold, which I guess is one that makes a bunch of torque. If you're trying to make torque, this is the one to get. So I've got a Trailblazer intake manifold, and then I've got this 92 millimeter Holley Sniper EFI throttle body. Let me pull this thing off of here just so I don't launch it onto the floor. Let me see if this intake manifold's gonna fit or if we're gonna have clearance problems with anything. This motor came with a truck intake manifold, but I had a friend with a dyno shop who he was like, "Oh, you need the Trailblazer intake manifold if you're going to be trying to make any power," and he had it there at his shop, and he gave it to me. So I was like, "Heck yeah, I totally want that." I think this is going to be a win. It doesn't hit the firewall at all, which is good. It clears the alternator. It looks like the throttle body's not going to be any issue there. So I guess I'll track down hardware and we'll figure out how to get this thing bolted down. Make sure I'm not blocking off something important on the back of the manifold. I want to make sure I can still get to my cam sensor in the back and my oil pressure plug, but I think we should be good to go. Rad. All right, it's many days later, and you'll notice a new project just showed up. I was down in California. I had to run down there to pick up some vehicles from Motor Trend. The video on this one should have already come out, but if you didn't watch it, go check it out. I picked up 3 projects from Motor Trend and super stoked about them. The downside is I just am like running out of space. It's crazy, packed, busy, chaos in here. But before I left and went down to LA to pick up these cars, I actually sorted out some of the problems with this intake manifold. And I'll go over that with you. Basically, I've got this Trailblazer intake manifold. I ended up ordering a factory fuel rail for it off of Amazon and a couple of other parts, a throttle position sensor, an idle air control valve, and some proper bolts to bolt the thing to the heads. So I've worked through a few of those little problems. We'll get this thing bolted on there and see if we have any other problems. I need to kind of do a little hardware hunting and make sure I got stuff for these, the idle air control and the throttle position, because I didn't have an old throttle body to start robbing hardware off of, and none of this stuff comes with hardware. All right, I ended up running over to the Ace Hardware and picked up some little M4 bolts for this thing, so I'm gonna just use the stuff I got. The throttle position sensor down here seems a little janky, but I guess I'll find out if it's working properly when I hook up the electronics and do my little test. And the idle air control valve looks exactly like the one that I would have bought if I spent the money at Holley. So I'm gonna bolt these down. All right, after another trip to the hardware store, I ended up having to buy some little spacers and longer bolts for the fuel rails, because the injectors that I got from Holley are talls, and apparently you can get a tall or a short injector, and this fuel rail and this manifold are made for a short injector. But I improvised and we should be good to go. I'll know right out of the gate if that thing's gonna be squirting fuel everywhere and I need to end up getting a shorter injector. But for now, we're gonna lower this thing down and see about getting the intake manifold onto the engine and see if we have any other issues we gotta work through. It seems like that's the name of the game on this, is working through issues and figuring out how to adapt. I got the intake manifold gaskets on here. They actually snap over these head bolts, which is really cool. And they're like locked in place, ready to go. I guess it's time to set the manifold on and see how things go. Looks like this should just kind of drop right on there. And hopefully clear all these other things that have to do with this vehicle. The intake manifold just dropped on. I've got 5 new bolts that are gonna go in here, and then I got like 5 old ones that I'll stagger around. That way, when I get the proper ones, I don't have to like take one whole side off. It can like actually stay kind of locked down, and I can swap the new bolts in. But look at that. It actually looks like an LS in a Jeep. This is good. I've got a couple little things with like the old factory wiring that need to come out, but nothing is like in the way so much that I can't deal with it. All right, I'm back out here. It's Tuesday night after work. Like every Monday through Thursday, I don't get enough done in the shop after hours at the day job. So I'm gonna have to call it quits. I gotta get in there and start editing this. I think we did pretty good. We got the transmission in, the new clutch, we got the engine in, the intake manifold. We're making moves big time on this thing. So keep following along. Next time, I swear, next time, this thing's at least gonna fire up, and we'll find out if the old kitty litter engine's good or bad, junk or not. We will figure all this stuff out. I've gotta throw like drive shafts in and transfer case, do exhaust, fuel system, wiring, and it's gonna fire up. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching.